All right, what's up, everybody? So welcome back to the next training vlog. Basically what today is a quote unquote push day. It's not too focused on the actual movement patterns, but more so on the muscles involved. Since obviously I'm a bodybuilder, that's what I'm focusing on, is growth in the muscles themselves. So today we're doing a little bit of chest work, some shoulder work, and a decent amount of bicep work towards the end of the session as well. Basically, my goal today is to get my chest and my biceps as big as humanly possible. And this means going all out on every set of every lift. Bicep training isn't accessory work. Biceps are just as important as pecs. So basically today, obviously, like I said, trying to get as big as I possibly can. First up, I'm going to do a little bit of Smith bench. We got some dips and more shoulder work after that. And of course, preacher curls and a couple other movements towards the end of the session. So let's get to it. Smith bench up first. The funny thing about this is, now that I'm training purely for hypertrophy, I'm slowly but steadily getting stronger than I was even when I was power building and chasing strength. It won't get you strong fast. It's always going to be secondary to your growth, and your strength will progress as you grow. You'll basically be needing to use as much weight as you need to challenge your muscle in your target rep range. But the funny thing about this is I'm just now kind of looking at the weight that I'm using. I usually calculate it by plates, not the actual weight on the bar. And I'm basically doing more weight than I've ever done before for this lift for more reps compared to like a regular barbell bench press. And I never really trained Smith bench that heavily during the power building days because, of course, it was a Smith machine. It was going to hurt me and it was ineffective and nobody cared about what your Smith numbers were. But now that I look at the actual weight that I'm using, it's stronger than what I was using on my barbell bench for the same reps back in the day. And I personally find the Smith machine to be a little bit harder just in terms of absolute numbers that you're working with. So personally, I don't really care too much about that. But what I'm trying to say is building up your muscle is ironically kind of the best way to get stronger in the long run in a lot of cases. So let's get to it. So essentially the goal with Smith bench is to pick a movement that's very stable. So obviously the bar is locked in place. I don't really have to worry about stabilization or coordination too much with the lift itself. So this just allows for obviously really good control of the bar, and that turns into a good proximity to failure for the chest in this specific movement. So when I pick my lifts, I usually try and get not necessarily every angle, but I try and get a variety of angles with a variety of resistance profiles and a variety of range of motion. So with the Smith bench, the drawback is you're not going to get that good of a stretch. The things that make up for that would be the stabilization and the fact that it's a lengthened biased movement. So yeah, the bar prevents me from getting the best stretch I can, but the challenging part of the lift is the bottom portion when your upper arm is parallel with the ground. So it does have some pros and cons, just like any other lift. And that's just one little insight into my exercise selection. First set complete, 7 reps there, which is one more than last week. One tip that I have for a lot of you guys that might be struggling with adding reps to your sets is it's not so much about trying to squeeze out an extra rep or force an extra rep, because at the end of the day, there's ways to do that for a long time before you hit a plateau, and it's almost artificial progress. Like for myself, if I wanted 8, 9, 10 reps on this, I could do it. If I bounced the bar more, if I didn't control the eccentric, if I arched a little bit more, widened up my grip a tad, there's ways I can make those extra reps happen. But it's not those extra reps that actually mean anything. It's being able to add reps with the same exact protocol. And I'm not telling you to overthink your setup and all this kind of stuff, but try and keep things consistent. And what this does is it lets you focus on destroying that muscle during the set. So for myself, those controlled eccentrics, the consistent technique and that insane proximity to failure where that last rep just got stuck halfway up, every ounce of muscle that I have in my chest is firing as hard as it possibly can to get that final rep. And it's not the 7th rep that's magical over the 6th rep from last week, because the stimulus is ultimately going to be the same. It's the fact that the last time I did this, I trained it just as hard as this time, and I built muscle from it, and I was able to add a rep today. And it's not so much about being able to add one rep every single session. Bodybuilding isn't a game, and we can't try and gamify it to that much of an extent. But at the same time, the reason why I can add these reps and slowly like get stronger on these lifts over time is because I smoke the target muscle and it has no choice but to grow. So go into each set with a mindset of destroying that target muscle, challenging it as much as you possibly can, not just going for reps. The number is completely arbitrary outside of your training history. Hit that muscle as hard as you can, force it to grow. Get out of your comfort zone, go beast mode on each set. You will grow, and ironically, you'll get stronger by focusing on not getting stronger in that weird kind of way. All right, so second set of Smith bench done. I'm not going to film every set because it'll just lengthen out the video, just bloat it up too much. So 2 sets on everything today. Dips are up next. And to give a little more insight into my exercise selection, the way I choose everything, dips have pros and cons as well. So dips, they have a really good resistance profile. They also have a great stretch. They lack stability. So the thing here is now I've kind of hit all of my target areas between just these 2 lifts. And I still have one more lift for chest that I'll show you in a second. But the Smith bench, the stability is great, so your proximity to failure is great. The dips, it gets that crazy range of motion. And both of these lifts happen to have great resistance profiles that are length and biased. The next lift I'm doing is short and biased. It's also very stable, but it doesn't get that crazy of a stretch. So all 3 lifts kind of target different aspects of what I'm looking for. One set of dips down, 1 to go. So basically with these dips, there's 2 things in the set that I want you guys to pay attention to. The first thing is going to be the technique itself. So how I execute the lift in terms of my form. With this, you'll notice a couple things. 1, I'm getting a pretty extreme stretch. I'm challenging my mobility. I'm seeing how far can I go down while my chest is still actively being stretched. And I'm not getting into a point where the rep is actually causing me any type of like joint discomfort or pain. Another thing is the slight lean forward, really good for the pecs. It minimizes the angle that your elbow has to go through, so it takes a little bit of the triceps out of it. We have other times to train the triceps. When you're training your chest, yeah, if you get some tricep growth, that's cool, but don't try and get everything at the same time. It's pretty simple just to do a couple more sets of direct tricep work after. If needed, any growth that I get in my triceps from chest training, that's just a bonus, but I don't expect it. Another thing that I want you guys to pay attention to on these dips is that final rep. So there's 2 things about this final rep that makes it a touch point for me that's actually important. I could have realistically given up halfway through that final rep that was a grinder and just called it failure. True failure, whether it's technical or muscular failure, isn't you giving up. It's you proving yourself that you can't actually get the rep. So don't fail, quote unquote, a rep until you've proven to yourself that you physically cannot do it at all, or you can't do it safely depending on the lift. Another thing here, and this is arguably more important, and this is just an insight into your mindset. This is a good form of self-accountability. If you're not controlling that final eccentric and you're squirming to get out of the set, I promise you, you have more in the tank in terms of getting outside of your comfort zone and pushing yourself than you think you have. It's so easy to just stop the set after the final concentric and hop right out of it when it starts to get a little bit of discomfort. So with this, it's a quick little insight into your own mindset. So for myself, you saw not only did I do the eccentric, I did it slow and controlled, the same way I did every other eccentric, even on the easy reps at the start of the set. So if you're finding yourself squirming in kind of trying to get out of that final rep and that final eccentric, you're not 100% committed to that set. And if you truly do want to get big and keep growing, you have to get outside of that comfort zone and hold yourself accountable. You have more than you think you do in the tank in terms of energy, effort, and the ability to just push yourself farther than you think you can. Final movement for the chest, we're doing the incline hammer strength press. This is a very stable lift. It's short and biased, so it's good for the upper pecs. It's more challenging at the end range of motion, which arguably isn't as beneficial as the stretch. I think there's enough anecdotal evidence that the stretch is pretty important, or at least having a lift being length and biased. So good lift to switch things up a little bit and challenge an area of the range of motion that hasn't been challenged too much in the previous two lifts. Cable side raise is up next. Done with chest for today. I have no idea where my other wrist cuff is, so it's a little odd because I have a home gym. I don't think anybody could steal anything from here unless people are lifting here that I'm unaware of, but I guess we're doing them unilaterally. So technique on here, well, more specifically setup. What you want to do, take your cable origin, set that up to generally mid-thigh height. Basically, where do your wrists end up when you just let them rest by your side? It should be a little below waist, maybe mid-thigh. Set them up at that level. It will make these length and biased rather than short and biased with dumbbells. A lot of us have done a lot of time with dumbbell lateral raises. This is a good way to challenge your side delts in a way they've never been challenged before. So outside of that, the only things I'd recommend for setup would be set the cable up behind you and open your stance very slightly so you can raise roughly 15 to 30 degrees in front of you rather than just to your side. So with the resistance profile being length and biased and you raising your wrist up obviously a little bit in front of you, that will pretty much eliminate all the traps from this movement. So I know for most guys, a lot of people have a hard time, myself included for a while, getting my traps disengaged. Not that you can disengage them entirely, but this will work the side delts a little bit more. You'll feel the traps a little bit less. All right, chest is toast, delts are not in the same category. So up next is biceps, and this is the final portion of the workout. We've got preacher curls first, and then I've got some cable hammer curls with a fun new variation that I'll show you when I get to that. So basically what I'd suggest for arm training, for somebody like myself, where I've come a long way in terms of my mindset, I can now afford to train arms at the end of my session because I know I'm going to train them hard. I have that self-awareness. A lot of people that don't have that mindset will benefit from putting their arm training earlier in their session. It's very easy to superset. Personally, on these push and pull days with this split, I don't really like to superset that much because the workouts are relatively short anyways. There's only a handful of lifts. So doing them at the end of the session isn't the end of the world. If you do prefer to superset or you aren't training your lifts at the end of your session that hard, one, I would try and fix that mindset. And two, you could benefit from moving stuff like arms earlier in the session because it won't really interfere with anything else. Well, as long as it's programmed properly. Don't do triceps before chest or shoulders on a push day. Don't do biceps before back on a pull day or something like that. But you get what I'm trying to say. Preacher curls up next, going for a full range of motion. The biggest piece of advice I have on here, especially to keep these consistent, wedge this pad into your armpit. So don't put the seat up too high and just put your elbows here like this. Actually lower the seat to where it needs to be. Lean forward so your armpits are on the pad like this, and your upper arms can't really move that much. A lot of people can move way more weight than they should be using because they can just do something as simple as this each rep. If you actually go strict, you can probably get away with using like 10-20% less weight. Setup cue for this. This especially works well if your cable has a square post right here. I know some of them are rounded, so it won't really work. With the square post, you can actually rest your elbow and your upper arm and your shoulder right on the cable post like this, and it doesn't let your elbow track backwards. If you're doing them with a free weight, or even depending on your position with a regular cable too, if you're just facing this way, basically with that, there's going to put a lot of pressure on your front delt, so this eliminates that entirely. It's just a cool little perk, lets you get more force output out of your elbow flexors. And on these, depending on how I'm feeling, I know everything is prescribed to be 2 sets today. Sometimes I'll just do 1 set on this because I'm quite literally completely smoked after 2 sets of preachers and 1 set on this. You'd be shocked how much you can get out of just 1 set, especially in something like this when you've already done a lift for the same muscle group, if you really do just push outside of your comfort zone. So I'm not trying to be reductionist or minimalist, but sometimes you can get away with a little bit less if you really do work a little bit harder. And that's all I've got for today's session. Basically, the plan for these videos moving forwards, the push and pull sessions will be just like a training vlog like I'm doing now, where it's a bit more interactive. The leg sessions I do at a commercial gym. I'm not going to be the guy that vlogs at a commercial gym like this, so I am just going to do a voiceover for those. I know a couple people were requesting voiceovers instead, so that'll give us a good happy medium. And of course, this will be split about 50-50 with my regular informative content, which will always be the foundation and a staple to my channel. So that's not going anywhere. This is just kind of a supplement to give more context to the channel and not just talk, but also kind of do the things and walk the walk and just inspire you guys too. So that's pretty much all I got for today. See you guys in the next one.